Today in current events from a Christian perspective, well, we've just got a lot to work through. We have the Video Music Awards as a low point in culture being broadcast on the children's channel Nickelodeon. Then we have Paw Patrol, which goes non-binary and gives kids, well, really bad websites to go to. Then there is some boy in Missouri who wins the title of Homecoming Queen. Yeah, you heard that one right. We're back to the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, remember them from the Dodgers, and they apparently are back with a vengeance. Or getting arrested for indecent exposure, or maybe both. All this and more today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Welcome back to Church Public. I'm your host, as always, Matt Odegaard, and I'm happy you stopped by today. If you are listening to the audio version, thank you very much, and I really appreciate your support. If you want to go to churchpublic.com, you can grab the video there. I will say that the last video that I made did not make it to YouTube. They didn't like it. So I'm working through that. It is on Rumble, but anyway, whatever. So we'll see where this video goes. I don't know at this point. It's very exciting. So if you're just on audio, I love you and thank you. If you want to see a couple of the videos, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't even want to see the videos. If a picture is worth 1,000 words and you don't want to know any of those words, that's possible. I can give you that because some of the stories today are just... Anyway, it's fine. So if you want to hit the buttons, the like and subscribe and share and give a review and do all those things, I really appreciate that too. And as always, if you want to support, you can go to churchpublic.com/support. Remember, this is current events from a Christian perspective because I want to help you live out your faith wherever you go. And I've decided to do that through the lens of current events because that way we can look at real life things and say, well, how are we going to deal with this? Because this is, in fact, real life. Some of these stories are stranger than real life, I guess, but this is just how we're doing. And with all that said, let's go ahead and get to some news. All right, so we're going to look at some news. We're going to start with the Video Music Awards. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. And I actually I gave myself like 5 minutes. I said, I'm going to look for 5 minutes to try to find a picture or video that I could or wanted to show. Honestly, I couldn't. After the 5 minutes has expired, I was like, this is hopeless. It's so bad that I don't want to show you anything from it. And I barely watched any of it too. So you should not watch it. And maybe no one should watch it. But we do have to talk about it. And the reason we have to talk about it is it was broadcast on the kids' channel, Nickelodeon. And that's really the thing that I want to hit on. It's that, so Viacom, I guess, is the originator of all this programming, right? And so they broadcast the MTV Video Awards on Nickelodeon. Now, I do have to say, I did see some pictures and some clips of this Video Music Awards that was broadcast nationally to the world on a kid's channel. And as I mentioned, I couldn't find, sure, there were some clips where it's just innocuous and boring, but that doesn't make any difference, right? The point is, there were a lot of clips that I can't show you because they are just so bad. They're not appropriate. They're sexually explicit. And this is on Nickelodeon, which ultimately was designed for children. There's actually a conservative group called 1 Million Moms. They, over the weekend when this occurred, blasted this media company Viacom in a statement saying that the content included scantily clad performers, sexually suggestive choreography during a time when most children were still awake and watching television during primetime viewing. They said, quote, "The sexually explicit content on this program is inappropriate for anyone, especially children," end quote. And I would agree. It's terrible. Anyway, the Video Music Awards aired last Tuesday. It was a week ago, and apparently there was a pre-show, there was a main show. Nobody cares, but apparently some people care, and so we have to talk about this. There were performances with costumes that barely were clothes. There was I can't even tell you all the things that were on there, and I don't really want to, but I think the worst moment, I don't know where to go with this, was when Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, that's not T-H-E, but T-H-E-E, caps, Megan Thee Stallion performed a song called Bongos with a bunch of backup dancers. Now, I can't, I literally will not read for you any of the lyrics of this song, which I guess is a really big hit, called Bongos. And I'm not going to read you any of the lyrics. And please, please don't go read the lyrics. Don't listen to the lyrics. I'm not going to do it. I don't think you should do it. What we have to keep in mind is this is the Video Music Awards broadcast nationally during a time when kids were awake on a kids channel, Nickelodeon. The Bongos is apparently about women's breasts. I'm just going to leave it there at that. That's the song. And that was their highlight of the night. That's what we're in. And you know what? We shouldn't even be surprised that this is where culture is, but we have to point out this is where culture is. And we have to notice, hey, this is what's really going on, and make sure we are watching our children like a hawk, because good grief, there is just craziness going on there. Nickelodeon, for reference, if you didn't know, started like 40 years ago for kids. That's why it was created. I am now in the older side of life, and I remember when it started, and I remember some of the shows, and they were just, old cartoons. They currently have shows like Paw Patrol, Rise of the Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, etc. And what we're going to do now is talk about Paw Patrol. So, Paw Patrol. People. And I know because I've got some little relatives who are in the younger range who watch Paw Patrol and like Paw Patrol. But there's a spinoff show. The spinoff show, I believe, is called Rubble and Crew. And Paw Patrol has now introduced their first non-binary character. Of course, it was going to happen. But this story, we really have to pay attention to as parents, just as citizens, as Christians. We really have to figure out what is going on here, because this is an animated show specifically and intently for children. You could make the case, though I wouldn't, for the past segment saying the Video Music Awards are not for children. Okay, I mean, you could say that, though the songs and the videos are on TV where children can watch them. I don't think they should. I'm just saying they could. However, you cannot make any case for anyone that an animated show called Paw Patrol is aimed at, targeted at, intently focused on anyone but children. That's just what it's for. So now we have this person who created a non-binary character for this Paw Patrol spinoff, Rubble and Crew. The person who created this is Linz Amer. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And that person, Linz Amer, is the creator of Queer Kid Stuff. This is an article that I'm looking at. Paw Patrol Universe gets its first LGBTQ character, a non-binary skateboarder. Rubble and Crew, a spinoff of Nickelodeon's smash hit kids show Paw Patrol, has dropped an episode with the franchise's first non-binary character and first confirmed LGBTQ character overall, written by Linz Amer of Queer Kid Stuff. Rubble, the Builder Pups, and River, and that is on Nickelodeon's Rubble and Crew. Okay, so here's what we need to know. What I'm going to play is a video, and this is actually another advertisement. This is an advertisement for Dove, the soap or whatever, where this person, Linz Amer, tells you exactly what they are aiming to do specifically as it relates to children. Let's listen.
Queer and trans kids aren't allowed to be themselves. I'm Linz Amer. I am the creator and host of Queer Kid Stuff. Queer Kid Stuff is a web series of me and my childhood teddy bear for kids and families that focused on LGBTQ+ and social justice topics. Yeah, I was a pretty happy kid. I think that that's when I was my most gender euphoric self, but I was misgendered as a child constantly. I make the work that I wish I had when I was a kid, right? We definitely need to make tools available to help the self-esteem of LGBTQ+ youth. What I'm trying to provide is a solution to the source of the problem. Talking to very young kids about gender and about sexuality and normalizing these ideas and celebrating them.
So, just in case, and you didn't need to watch, I guess it's Linz Amer, sorry about that pronunciation. The phrase there was specifically, intentionally talking to very young kids, not just teenagers, not just young adults, very young kids about gender and sexuality and normalizing it. I'm sorry. The goal is to talk to very young kids about sexuality?
How about no?
Yeah, sorry, that's going to be a no for me. The tweet sent out by this person said, if you're in the mood for Saturday morning cartoon, then all caps, I'm not going to shout it, but this is all caps, you should watch my episode of Rubble and Crew. It's officially out in the world, and that means I can talk about it. I got to write an episode of Rubble and Crew, the construction spinoff from Paw Patrol franchise. This is where we are. I mean, this is where we are. We're at this place where we celebrate and highlight and specifically seek out people to do this. So, like, this is what you have to think about, right? Whoever is making this show, Paw Patrol and Rubble and stuff, or whatever thing's called, they wanted this character. They intentionally sought out a person to do this character. This isn't inclusivity. This isn't diversity. This is a very careful strategy to find a person who says out loud, I want to tell young kids about sexuality and shape the future of the next generation. This isn't love is love. This is you must agree, and I'm going to teach your kids to agree, even if you don't know that I'm teaching them. This is importing this worldview through an animated children's show targeted at children. And, we can have discussions about what is morally right and morally wrong. But even though, I'll point to my Bible sitting next to me if you're just listening, God made it very clear what sex is and what gender is. But there are debates raging around the globe about this. But it's totally different when this company intentionally found a person to intentionally introduce sexuality into young children's animated programming. And we just need to make sure we understand that we know this is going on. Speaking of confusion, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, Oak Park High School in Kansas City, Missouri, just crowned a male student homecoming queen. Yeah, this is where we're going. So here is the homecoming queen, Tristan Young, who beat four female, I think I have a picture here. Here's four female candidates for the crown. The school posted, "Our queen, happy Hoko," or homecoming, if you will. So this person, Tristan, wrote, quote, "I've had a very difficult high school journey, but having the support of my friends, family, and Oak Park has helped me tremendously. I truly don't know where I would be without it." Young wrote on Instagram. I mean, what do you say? I guess as long as he's happy, right? We should just forget everything that we do. I know. You can't. I can't. That's why we're talking about it. So we're talking about it. And here are two questions that I have. Here's two questions. And when I see stories like this, these are the two questions that I now think about just relentlessly. Number one, where are the parents? Did no parent, no mom, and no dad, especially of the other four girls that were up for homecoming queen, did none of them say, no, like we're not, like this is not a thing? The homecoming queen is a girl? Did none of them say this? I don't know. Apparently not. And then that's first question. Second question is, why do girls keep going along with this? You saw this with all of the swimming and I can go on and on. All the sports, volleyball, all these sports. Why do girls keep going along with this? Like, really, this is a question that I cannot quite comprehend. Why do you participate in this? Why do you go on the field? Why do you be a part of this at all? When you find out that one of the people who is in the running for homecoming queen is not a girl, why don't you say, well, then I'm out. Like, I'm not going to be part of this. Like, this is no longer a competition because clearly all you're using it for is signaling or to make the national media or something. I mean, you're not doing it to help this poor boy that's confused. he's clearly confused. He needs some help. Sure. Yeah, we can acknowledge that. But why are all these other girls going along with it? Why are so many more at the school going along with it? Why are the parents, the grandparents, the brothers, the sisters? Why is everyone going along with this? This would stop in an instant. In an instant, if the students, the parents, the community just said, no, we're not going to participate in any of these shenanigans anymore. But apparently nobody does. So in conclusion, to me, this just tells me that people haven't changed in thousands of years. We, like sheep, have gone astray. Somebody smart in the Bible said that, right? That was God. But this cultural tide has turned what once was laughable. And I mean, literally, like it was a joke on Monty Python. It was a joke in Saturday Night Live for many years for a man to be a woman. It was a joke. But now this is the mainstream mandate, and all who stand against it will be silenced, which I probably will be at some point too, because you're not allowed to say this kind of stuff. But this is just real life. This is just true. Why is no one going out and saying these things? I know some people are, and you can say some people are. And I would love to say that we who say these things are pushing back and making waves. And I think we're making ground, and we'll keep saying true things. But then I see stories like this and I go, well, but parents, where were you? Dad, where were you? Mom, where were you? Grandma, grandpa, where were you? So to not be a complainer and to create a solution, dads, moms, students, grandparents, please hear me. Don't let this be the norm. Just stand up against this ridiculousness. And I guarantee if enough people say no, it'll just stop. All right. Speaking of perpetual indulgence. Oh boy. Yep. We're going to go here again. Now, some of you remember a couple episodes back, it was back in the summer. We had Pride nights raging all over the place. And one of them happened to be at the Dodgers. So you had the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, as seen here on the screen, if you're just listening. A bunch of men, and I mean mostly bearded men, dressed up as nuns in drag because they, whatever, I'm just going to stop there. So there, if you don't remember the LA Dodgers thing, right, there was a bunch of hot water that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence got in. First, the Dodgers had a Pride night, and they invited the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Again, keep in mind, this is the group that had a stage performance where a stripper did a dance on the cross dressed as Jesus. So that's a thing. Anyway, because in LA and LA County more broadly, there is a large Hispanic and Catholic population. So they said, I don't like this. They said no. Again, like we were just talking about in the last story. So the Dodgers said, okay, we're going to uninvite the sisters. But then the LGBTQAIP hashtag ++ $ squiggly emoji crowd got involved and got big mad, and the Dodgers caved again and re-invited the sisters. So finally, when that day arrived, basically no one came to that part of the game celebration, and there was even a big Catholic protest in front of the stadium, which was great. So that leads us to recently. Imagine my shock when one of those sisters is arrested for indecent exposure. Yeah, I hate to say I'm not actually surprised. So I'm just going to show this. This apparently is the quote unquote sister who was arrested for indecent exposure. And I'm not going to read much of this story at all because you don't want to know the details. And it doesn't really matter. All you need to know is that, surprise, surprise, this sister was arrested for indecent exposure. The sister of the Eureka House of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence said, another sister of the Eureka House of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence said, the group uses a, quote, long and complex process for admitting new members to ensure they will not bring dishonor to our order. They continued on, we offer our most profound apologies to the community for what happened and specifically to any individuals impacted by this inexcusable behavior. It is not representative of our order, our values, or the hundreds of individuals who serve as sisters, end quote. So I have questions. Is it inexcusable? And why is it inexcusable? By what standard is this inexcusable? Again, this group had a public display of a stripper pole Jesus on the cross, among other things that I can't talk about on here because they are indecent. So by what standard? What part of public indecency is worse? Where is the line here? Or is it only bad that he got caught? I have a lot of questions about that. if you literally dress up as a nun and call yourself a Sister of Perpetual Indulgence, which, by the way, is quite a name. And I looked up some of the names of these sisters, by the way, and I'm not going to read any of those for you either, because they're something. So you have these sisters that call themselves Perpetual Indulgence, like doing something perpetual, on and on and on, indulging, which means just living out whatever desire you want to live out, which is exactly apparently what this guy did when he was caught by the police for indecent exposure. So that's in the name. But you say, well, we have high standards for who we let in, so they don't embarrass us. Yeah. So let's keep going, because we could just go down this road for a while, and I don't really want to go down this road anymore, but we do have to go a little bit further, and that is that other members of the sisters, in a weird twist of timing, were scheduled to perform a drag Sunday at the Cathedral of Hope United Church of Christ in Dallas this last weekend. So while all of this, arrests came for the indecent exposure of one of the sisters. More of the sisters, apparently there are chapters across America. I guess that's how this whole thing works. More of them were scheduled to perform on Drag Sunday at the Cathedral of Hope United Church the Cathedral of Hope United Church of Christ in Dallas last weekend. So I guess that's what happened. Here's the flyer. If you're just listening, it's a special inclusive event. It says on September the 17th, and there's drag queens. We're going to experience blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so apparently it happened. And as we are in the age of social media, here is a quick video from that. We'll see how long I can stand watching this.
We recognize that all people are made in the loving image of God, no matter who they are.
I'm going to pause. All people are made in the loving image of God, no matter who they are. Agreed. Yes, that's true. All people are made in the loving image of God. However, what people do does make a difference. It's not just who you are. It's not just what you look like, which God doesn't discriminate over. It's what you do that actually makes a difference. And why we need Christ, I'll get into that more in a second. Let's keep listening.
How they dress and express themselves, or who they love.
Yeah. You love who you love. That's all you need to know. Man, there's so many things here, and I don't. I'm trying to filter really hard and like get to the bottom of this, because it does matter who you love, and God has been really clear that He cares who you love from the beginning, the literal beginning. Genesis 1 talks about man and woman, and then Jesus in Matthew 19 points back all the way to Genesis to talk about that. Paul talks to Timothy about Genesis. I mean, it's all over. And so it does matter who you love. So again, what's being conflated here, and the thing that we have to really understand as Christians is, yes, God loves you. But it does matter what you do, and it does matter your perspective on who God is. And really, reading through Romans, I know you're going to say, well, Romans says no one can make it. I know. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I know. But it does matter. And if you are willfully doing what God has said not to do, that's bad. If you're willfully doing what God has said not to do in a church, that's bad. I don't even know if I'm going to finish this clip because I'm kind of getting off on a thing here, but I think it's important. And I think it's important to understand that the church, this is ostensibly, or at least in title, a church. And what I don't understand, I'm going to ask the same question I did of the homecoming queen. Why? And if you're just listening, you may not see, there are rows and rows and rows and rows of people here. There's so many people here. And why is no one doing anything? And why are they repeating this? And why are they saying this? Do they really all believe this? Maybe. I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know. I read also in an article that this church plans to give, quote, blessings to the drag queens, end quote. I can only imagine that means giving them the weekly offering taken from those members to give to these drag queens. And so as I read that, I was, I'm always trying to come back to the Bible. Like, what does God think about what we do? What does God say about what we do? And so as I was reading that, I couldn't help but think, what is God doing in Acts 5? Now, some of you know Acts and have studied a bunch of Acts. Some of you may forget. I'm going to read a little bit of it for you because this is an interesting story. And I will say at the beginning, this is not a one-for-one. The story in Acts is not directly a parallel to what we're looking at in this story. That's true. But I think there are things we can learn about it too. So let's listen to what happens, because this is a weird story. And I don't hear this story taught very much in church, but it's in the Bible. I'm looking at my Bible right here. And I think we need to listen to what God does and then kind of talk about it a little bit. So this is Acts 5. Now, a man named Ananias, together with his wife, Sapphira, sold a piece of property. With his wife's knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself and brought the rest and put it at the apostles' feet. And Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart, you've lied to the Spirit and kept for yourself some of the money you received for this land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold, and after it was sold, why wasn't the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing? You have not lied to men, but lied to God. Now, if you don't understand what's going on here, Ananias and Sapphira, apparently wealthy, sold a house, decided to give some of it to the church. That's all great. That's actually wonderful, right? Selling a house, giving it to the church. But so why is it bad? Well, he and his wife, Ananias and Sapphira, brought some of the money to Peter and said, hey, here's some of the money. Or really what he said was, hey, here's all the money, but secretly they kept some of the money because they wanted some of the money. Really what it seems like is they're trying to play this game. And here is a thing that you can think about. There was a lady that was talking to Jesus. She did not have much to bring, and she had two little coins, two little coins. And she gave them to God, and Jesus says, see, this donation is better than any of the rest of yours because she gave everything she had with all of her heart. And Jesus, look at Matthew 5. Most of Matthew 5 is talking about how God looks at your heart, not just what you do. So why you do something is really, really important. It's important that you do something, but it's also important why you do something. Ananias and Sapphira apparently were trying to buy their place in the church or something like that. We don't know all of it, but we know that people would give to the church. We know that they gave to the church, but they didn't give everything to the church. Apparently they were wealthy because they had some kind of property. That's nice. And they gave some to the church and then lied about it. And that's a big thing too. So they didn't just lie to Peter or anybody else in the church. They lied to God. They tried to trick God. And that's a problem. And here's what happens. And this is why this story is an interesting story. Verse 5. When Ananias heard this, he fell down and died. That's kind of a big deal. In essence, God said, why did you lie to me? You shouldn't. And he died for it. Great fear seized those that heard what happened. Young men came forward. 3 hours later, verse 7, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter said, hey, is this the price you got for the land? So again, it's not that they didn't give all that they had. It's that they tried to say, yeah, we sold the land for, I'm just going to say $500. That's not right, but whatever. They sold the land for $500. And then they say to Peter, well, we're going to give you $300. That's what we sold the land for. And Ananias tried to get away with that. Died. Sapphira gets up and Peter says, hey, is this the price you and Ananias got for the land? Yes, she says, that is the price. Peter said to her, how could you agree to test the Spirit of the Lord? Look, the feet of the men who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out too. And she fell down dead at that moment. So this is a weird story, I know. And you're sitting there, Matt, why are you telling me this weird story about two people who lied to God about their offering to God and then got killed? This is an important thing to point out here. God is holy. And I know we talk about that a bunch, but but I struggle with it. And hopefully you struggle with it too. And the reason you need to struggle with it is God is holy, and he's so holy that people like Isaiah, who knew God and knew about God and probably knew everything, knew more about God than you and I will ever know about God, and then came face to face with an angel of the Lord and said, hey, I'm not worthy. Basically take the coal of fire that you have and just burn me up, because I like, you should just kill me now. That's how unworthy I am. And we, just silly idiot people, come to God and go, it's not that big a deal to lie to God. But it is. It is a big deal to lie to God. And people, and you just say, well, Matt, people lie all the time. Yeah, I know. And this is clearly an extreme example. God is using in this moment to teach this lesson to this particular church. We do need to understand that. However, God is God, and God has the right to life and death. We see that throughout the entirety of Scripture. And it should remind us of two things. We are, from the fall of creation, in the very beginning with Adam and Eve, the promise for us is death. That is just it, period. The promise for us is death. And without Christ, that is the end. Again, reading through Romans 3 and 5 and 8 and 6 and 9. And anyway, the promise that we have is just death. And we see that death immediately seized in these two instances when they lied to God. God uses this as an example. But even though we don't see it now, when we don't have Christ and his righteousness, the punishment that God has is still the same. Those who mock God, those who mock his church, are still going to face that. And that should make us sad. And it should motivate us to continue to preach the word of God, the good news of Jesus Christ, because that is the hope, and it's the only hope for anyone in this world. It's the only hope for me. It's the only hope for you. It's the only hope for any of our neighbors. And we need to make sure that we lean into that, which is why when I see stories like this, and when I see stories where crazy things like the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are sitting in a church and reciting that God just loves you no matter what, that's not the gospel, and that's not true, and that's not real. And we need to really call this out, because they're openly mocking God and his church. And at least in one instance, that didn't go well. And in reality, in every instance, it's not going to go well. We just don't see it now, which is why Jesus in Matthew 28 says, therefore go and make disciples. In other words, go and tell the world Jesus Christ is Lord. We're supposed to do that. We need to do that, because it's very, very important that people understand the kingdom that they're in. They may not agree. They may push back against you, but we have to keep pushing and say, well, you can argue. You can get upset. You can yell, but what's true is still true. Your emotion doesn't change any of that. I'm going to go ahead, and I think we have time for one or two more stories. If you don't, hit pause and come back later. But I think these are interesting enough to get to. So we're gonna talk about these stories right quick. Okay, so unfortunately, in a pretty similar event, we have this lady who takes Psalm 139, which is a wonderful psalm. And actually, I use it a lot when we talk about the right to life, because it talks about how God knew you ahead of time. Well, this lady, Reverend Dr. Carla Jean Bailey from Pilgrim Congregational Church in Duluth, she says it differently. Let's just listen to this.
Join with me in our responsive call to worship printed in your bulletins and also available to read on the screens. Take pride in who we are as beloved of the Holy One.
Okay, that might have been a little hard to hear for the audio. If you're on the video, you can see this slide here, and I'll read this for you. So this is the call to worship that she used based on a psalm, based on Psalm 139. And I'm going to read Psalm 139 for you in a moment. But this is... Gosh, Why do I choose to do this? I don't know. So this is what the call to worship says. The God of transforming love gathers us for worship, calling us to take pride in who we are. And as you heard, she very emphasized, take pride in who we are as beloved of the Holy One. Which, okay, I can't stop myself. Like, really, we're supposed to take pride? I feel like that's an original sin, but okay, let's keep going. So then the response is, we praise God for we are queerfully and wonderfully made. It goes on. There's a lot about pride. I'm not even going to read it. If you're looking, you can pause the video and read this. If not, I'm gonna keep going. But what I want to do is I want to turn to Psalm 139, 139 verse 14. So if you are unfamiliar with 139, Psalm 139, you should grab your Bible. You should open it and read this. It is, again, as I mentioned, a wonderful psalm. It is a psalm of encouragement. It's a psalm of place because it puts you into your rightful place of where you are in God's kingdom. And I think that's important for us because otherwise, as we saw at the beginning of this, like I'll pull it up again here, you take pride in who you are. But that's not what God says. God says you should know your rightful order as a created being under the Creator. And as we looked at the other day, Proverbs 9, you need to fear God because that's the beginning of wisdom. And it's interesting to me that the word she changed is I'm queerfully and wonderfully made, when the actual word is Psalm 139:14, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Why fearfully, wonderfully made? Why the word fearfully? Because when we have the right order of the world, the right order of our world, we understand that we are to fear God in that we revere him and hold him higher than ourselves because he is the creator and we are the created. We are not equal to God. Almost every story in the Old Testament and a lot in the New remind us that we are not equal to God. And we are fearfully and wonderfully made because God made us. He is the creator. Now, I'm going to go out on a leap. I don't know what this Reverend Doctor fully believes in her theology. I don't understand a lot. Actually, I have a clip here of a Noah story that she talks about that I don't think I'm going to have time for today. I'll just say this about it. I'm not going to play the video right now because I don't want to take the time, but she gives the Noah story, and let me just say, you could guess, she does not do great with what actually happened in the Noah story. And she's trying to stretch this thing she says something like, I love rainbows and Noah's all about rainbows and God doesn't want to be mean to anybody anymore. And that's why he made the rainbow or something like that. I mean, it goes on and it's something like that. And it is wacky and not scriptural. But anyway, you could kind of guess where that's going. Where I want to land though is this Psalm 139, because I guess that she did not continue on and read the rest of Psalm 139. Psalm 139, for instance, starting in verse 19. If only you would slay the wicked, O God. Away from me, you bloodthirsty men. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Yeah, that kind of speaks for itself. She continues on. I'm sorry. The psalm continues on. Do I not hate those who hate you, God? Abhor those who rise up against you. I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. This is a great psalm because, again, it reminds me that I am not God. As I like to say, there is a God and I'm not him. It really puts things in perspective, in the right perspective. And here's something that is unpopular right now. This is not just an Old Testament thing. God says a similar thing in Revelation 2:6, a similar thing in Romans 9:13. Jesus himself talks about hate in Luke 14:26. But we don't like to talk about hate because all we want to talk about is love. After all, love is love, or that's what the culture tells us. The current spirit of the age says love is love and you should just love everybody. Or even this idea that the culture has co-opted that you're just supposed to love your neighbor and everyone is your neighbor. And while this is kind of true, that's missing part of the intent. We have to deal with passages like this in Psalm 139 and Revelation 2, etc., where it clearly says that we are supposed to hate those God hates. So what do we do with that? Because God is love and we can't hate people, right? We have to understand this from a biblical perspective, not a psychological perspective, because everything in modern life wants to have an emotion. I mean, Disney did a whole movie about emotions having emotions, right? What was that movie called? Feelings, or I don't know. I don't remember what it's called, whatever. So we just want to emotionalize everything, but that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what God is talking about here. That's not what the people of God are talking about here. It's not an emotion. It's an action. It's a perspective. It's a point of view. God is love. God is love. Therefore, God cannot love those that don't love him. He cannot bless those that curse him. Those people who are in open rebellion to God, as we read about in verse 21, do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and hate those who rise up against you? Those who are in open rebellion, who go into a church, who go into society and call on God's name and yet are against God, are God's enemies. They're just enemies of God, and they're enemies of the church, and they're enemies of the believer. And here's what it comes down to in your everyday life. This is not an emotion. It's not anger. It's an action. When someone is against God, against the church, against the Christian, we must side with God. We have to understand that to be aligned with God is to be against the world, or vice versa. The world is going to be against you. Jesus talks about this a lot. The world has hated me, and it will hate you also. And we hear here that we need to align with God, not align with the world. Now, the enemy of God is going to find their eternal reward. That's his department. We don't have to worry about that. Our department is to declare that Jesus is Lord. Again, Matthew 28. But this queerfully made thing, I feel like God is just not going to love that. All right, we're going to skip the queer Noah, and I'm going to go straight to something that I like, because that was a lot of deep things that just aren't great. We need to love God. We do need to love others, but we also need to understand that lining up with God is going to create some enmity. Again, root of the phrase enemy. It's going to create this thing with the world where the world does not like you, and you are not supposed to become like the world. That's the thing we have to know. So let's get to something that I like. And I don't do a lot of sports. You guys know that. But I happened to see this, and I loved it. So this is a person named Coco Gauff. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. I don't know if I am, and I apologize if I am not. But this lady won a Grand Slam title during the U.S. Open of tennis and sports. And Sports Center did not like it. So this is to me a funny one. So here is Sports Center tweeting out a picture of Coco kneeling down. And again, if you're not watching, she is knees on the ground, hands on the bench, literal fingers grasped together, head in her hands. Now, if you were anybody else, what would you say she was doing here? Pretty much everybody would say she's praying. SportsCenter, however, said Coco took a moment to soak it in after winning her first Grand Slam title. I just love how people hate God and just will not acknowledge that people follow God outside of the church. All right, so there were a bunch of responses. I'll just show you one. This is Tony Dungy, and he said, quoted this tweet and said, "I hate to break this to you, SportsCenter, but Coco was not soaking it all in at this moment. She was praying. She's been very open about her Christian faith in the past. Seems pretty obvious what she's doing here." And yes, it's obvious what she's doing here. I just love this. I love this because this reminds you that this world is going to say, no, you're not allowed to bring your faith out into the world. You're not allowed to say that Jesus is Lord. You're not allowed to pray on the field. Of course, you're not allowed to pray on the field, right? You can't bring your prayer into this sports ball. And yet we can, and we should. Coco said of her prayer, quote, I don't pray for results. I just ask that I get the strength to give it my all, and whatever happens, happens. I'm so blessed in this life. I'm so thankful for this moment. I don't have any words for it, to be honest, end quote. And I love that. And I think that's such a great perspective. We don't have to have all the answers. We may not even know the right questions. But what we can know is, who is God and where are we in his kingdom? And we know that. And we know that based on Jesus. And I hope that you have Jesus today. We'll leave it there for the day. No matter what is going on around in this culture, you should always pray. And I just love ending on this part where she is praying to God, thanking him for the blessing that she has received. Jesus says, now he was telling them a parable to show them at all times they ought to pray and not lose heart. That's Luke 18. With that, for ChurchPublic, I'm Matt Odegaard, and I hope that you will keep the faith. thanks again for watching. I am Matt Odegaard, your host as always, and I really hope that you will keep the faith. If you liked this, hit the like, subscribe button, share button, go on and check it out in all the socials. There's some additional content that I'll be posting there, and otherwise, we'll see you next time. Keep the faith.